We're in Judges chapter 4, the book of Judges chapter 4. Yeah, the clock was right this morning, but it's back wrong again, so don't know what happened. Well, it's right once a day anyway, right? Twice a day? You remember one of the things that we're dealing with in the book of Judges is every man did what was right in his own eyes. That's a part of the issue that's going on in Judges. It's a part of the problem with mankind in general. It's an issue with modern man. It's an issue with mankind in general because men want to do what men want to do. I mean, mankind. So that's the difficulty. So really, Judges could be, as well like Joshua was, Judges could be a book that's about faith. It could be a book that describes those who have faith as well as those who do not have faith. That was a lot about what you found in the book of Joshua. So the focus of what we find in Judges chapters 4 and 5 is the judge Deborah. When we read about Deborah and we read about Jael and we read about those who have some kind of leadership in the nation of Israel, it is all going to boil down whether they want to do the will of the Lord or not, and whether they want to do what's right or whether they have enough faith to follow through. And so the follow through on that obviously is what we're concerned about at this point. So we have this every man doing what was right in his own eyes seems to be a summary. It's not about what we think is right, but it's about what God says is right. When we do what we think is right, oftentimes it comes out to be evil in the sight of the Lord. And obviously our ways are not His ways. He's the one that should be able to give the rules, and we obey those. So when you open up chapter 4, notice how it begins, chapter 4, verse 1, because the very heart of what's taking place in chapters 4 and 5, this being the scene that includes Deborah as the judge, and the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud died. That's a description of the state of mankind. It's a description of what's going on in the nation of Israel, because here you have them going back to the ways that they once went, the way that they used to go. The fact that they were not going to deal with God on His terms. They were going to do what they wanted to do. And so the Lord turns Israel over to King Jabin, the king of Canaan, and he commands the armies over them, and for 20 years they're oppressed. Notice verse 2. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Haggayim. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, for he had 900 chariots of iron and oppressed the people of Israel cruelly for 20 years. Now you might remember that earlier in chapter 3, we also saw where they were kept as slaves for 10 years. So this cycle is not going to be broken. And so this is the case of what's going on here. They are under the command of the king of Canaan. And notice the end of verse 3 where it says, or at least verse 3, where it says that the people cried out, and one of the reasons that they cried out was because of the oppressive command of armament that he had. okay? 900 chariots of iron would be like, how would you compare that, you military guys? How would you compare that modern day to maybe 900 tanks? Yeah, and we're foot soldiers, or we're on horseback or something like that. Well, the idea it is getting across is in this text that there seems to be no way that this oppression of the Lord's people is going to end anytime soon because of the army that he has, because of the 900 chariots of iron. And so there seems to be nothing that can break this. So that, I think that's the reason that's there, is to say the people are crying out, but there's nothing that can be done physically. There's nothing that can be done. We can't bring an army against them. That's just not going to happen. We're not going to be able to defeat him with our army. We just can't do that. So what's going to happen is the same thing that happened with the entry and the defeat of the cities and the people of the land of Canaan the first time, is that if there's going to be an intervention, if anything's going to happen, then the Lord's got to be behind it. He's going to have to be the one that takes care of this, because there's no defeating this army, these tanks or these weapons that are futuristic in nature. I think I read somewhere where it'd be like having 900 fighter jets. That makes it even worse. Maybe he's just exaggerating, but the idea is there is no way to command this army, to defeat this army under the command of Sisera here. So that seems to be what's taking place. So we're introduced then, after this kind of shocking introduction. The people did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He was very displeased with them. The Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, and the people cried out to the Lord for help. There's no but here, but you could say, but this army is powerful. It is strong, and nobody can really do anything for you on the surface, at least looking at it from a human standpoint. So we're introduced then to Deborah. Deborah is going to be introduced to us in verse 4, specifically verses 4 and 5. Let's just read those. Now, Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the people of Israel came to her for judgment. Now, I don't know if you remember, but last week, or maybe it was the week before, we talked about the purpose of a judge, and one of the things that a judge did was to rule over or make judgments in that way. So make judgments for the people to come to a decision or make a conclusion in matters that were brought to them. And so judges did that, but they were also put in this leadership position to be able to make decisions, and many times these decisions were military decisions. Oftentimes they would lead them into battle, and they would be, from that perspective, some judges were more inclined to that as well. So she appears at this time in the history of the nation of Israel when things are in disarray, to say the least. They've been in bondage now for 20 years. God put them there. Who's going to get them out? If they get out, it's going to be God that's going to get them out. That's pretty clear, I think, by that. But then Deborah, who is a prophetess, and also she's been a judge as she sat at the gate and judged for the people, verse 5. And then in verses 6 through 10, you have some direction that's been given by Deborah, attempting to move Israel back into compliance with the word of the Lord, trying to move Israel back into the way that they need to walk and the things that they need to do. So Barak is commanding 10,000 men. Now, what's 10,000 men going to do against these 900 chariots of iron? A blip on the radar. It's just not going to do very well. So here's what happens. Let's pick up verses 6 through 10, and you've got Deborah and her interaction with Barak, who is the commander. Verses 4 and 5 we've already read, so we'll pick up in verse 6. She sent and summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam from Kedesh Naphtali, and said to him, "Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you, go gather your men at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the people of Naphtali and the people of Zebulun? And I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you by the river Kishon, and his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand." Okay, that's 6 and 7. What is Deborah's question now to Barak? Did you hear the Lord's command? What did the Lord command you to do? So she reminds him what the Lord commanded him to do, and what was that? You go to this particular place where the river Kishon is, and I will draw out Sisera with all of his army, his troops, and I will give him into your hands. It's pretty clear, isn't it? Pretty straightforward. So who put Israel in bondage? The Lord did. Who's going to get them out of bondage? The Lord is, because Deborah says, okay, Barak, didn't the Lord tell you this? Barak said, this is verse 8, said to her, "If you will go with me, I will go, but if you will not go with me, I will not go." And she said, "I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." All right, that's halfway through verse 9. Let's stop right there. Okay, here's my dilemma. All right, I don't know if he's being unfaithful, or I don't know if he's scared. I don't know why he says, "I won't go unless you go with me." I'm not satisfied on why he asked her to go. If you are, you can help me with that. But because he was willing to go, the devil would go, which was human, but he told him God would deliver, but he seemed like he didn't have the faith in God that he needed. Okay, that's the way I'm leaning, because what it looks like to me is he didn't have the faith he needed to do what God said do. Why he needed Deborah, I'm not sure. She is the judge over Israel. God's raised her up. Maybe he believes that she has some kind of special influence. I'm not sure. Maybe he doesn't have enough faith that he might get out there and not be able to hear the voice of the Lord anymore. I need some backup. Well, see, he completely refused. But in verse 9, Deborah says, "Certainly I'll go." She does. She said, "I'll go." The faith that was needed. Exactly. Yeah. And then she puts a stipulation on that maybe because of the lack of your faith, that's kind of the way I'm leaning, because of the lack of your faith, the Lord is not going to deliver Sisera into your hands, but he's going to be taken by a woman. That makes it sound to me like that Barak is being unfaithful here, because it's going to be pretty obvious as Deborah makes the statement that you're not going to get any praises for defeating Sisera, the general. God's going to let a woman take care of that issue to prove your unfaithfulness was unwarranted. Now, we hadn't got there yet, but you probably read ahead or you probably know this story, but it's a fascinating story how ultimately God did allow Sisera to be in a particular place at a particular time, to be killed by a woman. Okay, anybody else observations here?
Maybe he knew God was with her.
Yeah.
And he wanted to make sure that she went with him because God was with her and he knew that.
Yeah.
It might not have been so much about his faith, it might have just been his comfort, maybe. You know, a lady might tell some of us guys, hey, look, everything's going to be all right. God's still in control. You pray about it and, you know, do right and it'll all work out. Where we're all discombobulated, they just say, look, it'll all work out if you do right. Maybe that was his, you know, companion friend that would say, you need to do right, you need to do right, and convince him.
Yeah. Yeah, and even with that, I still think that what it boils down to is he didn't have enough faith to say, okay, let's go then. Let's go. I'll see you on the other side there, Deborah.
all through the Bible, first I was sort of leaning toward Barry, but when God told so many people to do something, they didn't question it. And they didn't say, I'm going to take somebody with me. When he told Abraham to leave, he just did it.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't question anything. He said, I got to have somebody to go with me, between me and you. If you had true faith, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
If God said, you and two more go out there, and a lot of times there was just a few of them that went and killed hundreds of thousands.
The 300. So, yep. Gideon and his little entourage. But, yeah, look at it from a human perspective. God has asked Barak to go against this army that is unbeatable. You can't beat it. Now, it's no different than the taking of the land of Canaan, is it? Was the city of Jericho beatable? No. By an army, it wasn't. Was the land of Canaan, would you be able to take the land of Canaan with that couple of million people that you had and these agricultural brick makers now and all of it? Are you going to be able to take the land of Canaan against those marauding, raiding, no morals kind of grew up fighting since they were 2 years old kind of people, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Jebusites? Are you going to be able to? No, you can't do that. So from the human perspective, he's been asked by God to go against an army that's unbeatable. So there's nothing different than what he's been telling people all through this little journey. You're going to do something that's impossible to do, but I'm going to be with you. I've already given it to you. And it says it there in this text. Deborah reminds him, didn't God say, you go out there, you position yourself in the right place, and I will give him into your hands. Period. There's no contingency. The only contingency is you do what I said do.
Would we have prior knowledge of when they, at what length of time it transpired when they went into the land of man? Would he have prior knowledge of how they conquered all of that?
Well, yeah, but it would be secondhand knowledge because Joshua and all the elders are all dead. Yeah, so.
I just wondered if he did, surely he would know he was God.
I think the stories were passed on. I don't think there's any problem with that. But see, immediately after Joshua and the elders died, the nation begins to go off into idolatry. All right, I left off in the middle of verse 9, so let's pick up back at verse 9. And she said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you're going will not lead to your glory. So you're not going to get any glory for defeating this army and Sisera, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kedesh. And Barak called out Zebulun and Naphtali to Kedesh, and 10,000 men went up at his heels, and Deborah went up with him. And that's through verse 10. You have Barak who gathers the 10,000 that he was asked to gather. He is where he needs to be. He is in that particular place, that particular spot where he needed to be, where God told him to be. And there beside him is Deborah the prophet and judge, prophetess. And so there she is with him. And he's commanding the Lord's army. And so they're waiting on the Lord to do what he said he was going to do. So,
In that time, look at where women were on the hierarchy.
oh yeah,
And now, for him to say, you to go, then we're going to take it. You know, I'll go and let you be the boss. So where does that put him as far as faith and
responsibility. Yeah, that's something I didn't begin with. Dale brings it up, but women were not greatly put in leadership roles. That wasn't something that happened. And for God to raise up Deborah in this situation, I think there are a lot of lessons that we're going to learn from this story about Deborah, but also about what happens at the death of Sisera, because he's going to use women in chapters 4 and 5. It's going to be women who are used to bring the nation back and put them back on that right track. So, yes. A prophetess and a judge. She sat at the gate and listened, and judged for the people. Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. In that kind of significant position, she's it. She's the one. But obviously, Mari's observation is she had built up a reputation. The people respected her. And I don't know how long she'd been doing this, but obviously for some time she'd been sitting at Deborah's gate or Deborah's tree. I don't remember which one, but the palm of Deborah. Okay, so everybody knew where to find her. Okay, so it was her. She hung her shingle there. You come to me if you need decisions made, you need judgments made, that kind of thing. So she had built up a reputation. She had their respect, and God raises her up as a leader for the nation of Israel. So they are parked there as God had instructed. You've got Barak, Deborah, the 10,000, and so verses 11 through 16. Let's look at 11 through 16. Now Heber the Kenite had separated from the Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent as far away as the oak in Zananim, which is near Kedesh. When Sisera was told that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera called out all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the men who were with him from Harosheth Hagoyim to the river Kishon. And Deborah said to Barak, "Up, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand." Literally not Sisera, but the army, okay? Not Sisera, but the army, because Sisera is not going to be in his hand, okay? Sisera is in your hand. Does not the Lord go out before you? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him, and the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army before Barak by the edge of the sword. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. And Barak pursued the chariots and the army to Harosheth Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. There was one man left, and who was that? Sisera, the commander of the army, okay? Right. Yep. So the victory is obvious. There's no doubt about whose victory this is. There's actually no doubt in the world about whose victory this is. Now, here's a question that I have. Why did he get out of the chariot? He's in an iron chariot. If I want to get out of here fast, I probably got at least 2 horses pulling that chariot, probably 4, maybe. Yeah, and I'm heading out of there in a hurry, but he got out of the chariot. Now, I don't know if this is it or not, but let me throw this out there. In chapter 5, verse 1, under the song of Deborah and Barak, chapter 5, verse 21 says, "The torrent Kishon swept them away, and the ancient torrent, the torrent of Kishon, march on my soul with might." Was there a torrential rain that caused this iron chariot to sink? And he didn't have a choice except to get out. Now, that may be metaphorical language, may be talking about the torrent of the Lord or the torrent of the 10,000 Israelites, but it refers to the river, Kishon, and it says torrent, which we talk about torrential rain. Could that be why he got out of the chariot and ran? That specific place, yeah. Now, if it didn't bog down all the others, what if God himself did it specifically to Sisera so that things would turn out the way they're about to turn out? Anyway, just thought I'd bring that up because in chapter 5 is the song of Deborah, and that's where you find verse 21, which talks about this river and talks about the torrent. So did the Lord work things out so that this iron chariot sunk? Imagine that thing was pretty heavy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I thought about this as well. It could have been that the death of the chariot driver and whatever makes the chariot stop, and so he kind of gets blocked in and can't go anywhere and has to get out and run. I don't know. Yeah. Could have killed the horses, yeah. All right, but note what else takes place. Now, because the story doesn't end there, because we've got to get this general, don't we? We can't let this thing end. I mean, the movie can't end here. The bad guys got to get got. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were put in this position because of their evil ways. They turned away from the Lord's. They're put in this position, and they are sacked by a foreign nation, taken into captivity, taken in as slaves. And that seems to be, as Maury points out, that seems to be the way God deals with their evil, is to bring an army in, and the only way to get out of that is for them to get an army themselves. Yeah, that's right. All right, so 17, that's through verse 16. So in 17 and following is the success, the death of Jael. Okay, we're in chapter 4, verse 17. So this would be not the death of Jael, but the death of Sisera at the hand of Jael, the wife of Heber. That's why verse 11 is in here. Let's go back to chapter 4, verse 11, because it's referred to in verse 11, Heber the Kenite, separated from the Kenites, the descendant of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent as far away as the oak of Zananim, which is near Kedesh. Okay? So we're not looking at a map, but if you are at the river Kadesh, in the valley of Kedesh, and here's where the battle's going on, this descendant of the father-in-law of Moses has pulled himself away and put his little dwelling near this river and this valley where this battle's going on, okay? That's why verse 11's there. Because what happens after the battle, verse 17, but Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber, from verse 11, the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin and the king of Hazor in the house of Heber the Kenite. So Sisera flees there thinking that he is safe because he has a peace treaty with these Kenites. He may have a peace treaty with Jael's husband, yes, but not with her. She wasn't going to have any part of this. So notice what happens. Jael came out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me, do not be afraid." So he turned aside to her and into the tent. She covered him with a rug, and he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a skin of milk and gave him to drink and covered him. And he said to her, "Stand at the opening of the tent, and if any man comes and asks you, is anyone here, say no." All right, end of verse 20. All right, stop right there. Don't read any further yet. Don't keep reading. I don't want to spoil the end. I want to spoil the ending. So here's the setting. "Come on in, my lord. Come on in. Come on in. You'll be safe in here." So she ushers him into the tent. "I sure am thirsty." She gives him a sheep organ full of milk. He drinks that. She covers him up, and he goes fast to sleep. But before he goes to sleep, he says, "Now you stand outside and guard the door. And if anybody comes and asks if I'm here, you tell them no. You haven't seen me." Perfect play. You've seen that in all the spy movies, right? "Oh, I haven't seen him. I don't know where he is." Okay? So that's the setting. Let's see what she does. Verse 21. "But Jael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand. Then she went softly to him and drove the tent peg into his temple until it went down into the ground while he was lying fast asleep from weariness. So he died." That's a pretty graphic description, isn't it? He must be laying on his side because it goes in the temple, through his head, and into the ground on the other side. She was determined, because I imagine that hammer had to swing a few times to get that tent stake through this man's head. So she kills Sisera. That's everybody. They've destroyed the army. The 900 chariots of iron have been dismantled. They're taken care of. The troops have been taken care of, and now Sisera, the general, has been taken care of. And she went. It says, verse 22, after he died, "Behold, as Barak was pursuing Sisera, Jael went out to meet him and said to him, 'Come, and I will show you the man whom you're seeking.' So he went into her tent, and there lay Sisera dead with the tent peg in his temple." So on that day, now notice verse 23, because this is kind of this wraps it all up, and it gives us insight into what we've already said and re-said, which is this wasn't Barak's battle. This wasn't Deborah's battle. This wasn't up to them to win the battle. Notice verse 23. "So on that day, God subdued Jabin the king of Canaan before the people of Israel. And the hand of the people of Israel pressed harder and harder against Jabin, the king of Canaan, until they destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. So this whole scene opens up at the beginning of chapter 4, where we see Deborah being the judge, and she comes to Barak and says, "Has not the Lord told you what you must do? And He will deliver them into your hands." And so that's how it began. And it ends with, "And the Lord delivered the king and the kingdom, Jabin, into his hands." Let me just say this before we leave Jael or jail. She did the right thing. She did what the Lord wanted done. She may have reaped repercussions after this, but the right thing was done, and that was that Sisera and all of his troops and all of their armament was taken care of. All right, any observations? Barak, yep. Yes, he did. And I had that written right here. As a matter of fact, thank you for bringing that up. Nelson brings up Hebrews 11:32 through 34, where Barak is in that roll call of the faithful. And I think the interaction at the beginning of that is the only place that I can find where he didn't have that faith that he needed. So following that, I think I can solidly say that Barak had the faith that he needed to be included in this roll call of the faithful. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. All right, my time is up. We'll start in chapter 6. If you want to go read the song of Deborah and Barak, that's chapter 5. All of chapter 5 is a celebration of the victory. So read that. We'll pick up in chapter 6 next week. Appreciate your comments.